Am I here? Can you hear me? Sounds like I'm on a huge delay. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I had it pulled up in like another thing, and I think that's why I was echoing. So I'm good, right? Okay. So there was a lot of things that I was looking at today. One of them, I was going through the comments, and someone had put a video. I don't know if they answered me if I said that I could watch it or play it, but I'm going to anyway. Hopefully that's okay. Uh, because the more that I was watching it, I was like, I had been thinking this. I was literally just talking to somebody about this the other day. Um, does anybody know if the car was ever caught on camera between Pullman and Moscow? So, not the very last ping, or not the very last camera in Pullman, and not the very first camera in Moscow, which was at Indian Hills Drive. Was there any in the middle? No. Okay. Because I didn't think so either. Not that I'm aware of, not that I'm aware of. Okay. Because someone said that there was at least two mentioned. And I knew that I had read it many times and that I did not see anywhere where it was in between those two places. So I had put out a tweet today and I said, it would be really good for me if I could just see one instance where that car is in between, like en route or en route to Moscow, right? Hey Tim. So I was like, where is one? There must be one in between those two places, right? Because how else can you show that it's the same car, let's say if you don't have a license plate. And I feel like, in my opinion, the best way to do that would be to show at least one place where that person was in between the two. Tattletale said, why only stock photos and why no pic of him when they claim he returned the next morning? I agree. I've had people say that probably the reason they used stock photos was because the photos that they had were very blurry. A wormhole ghost car. So there is a back road. I think it's called Sand Road, uh, where when I was looking at the map right after the PCA came out, I was like, why would he take main roads? Like with all cameras, I just find it hard to believe that someone that was planning something like this wouldn't be aware of all the cameras and do a little bit better to avoid those cameras as opposed to just driving straight through them. My hair looks crazy. A gas station his car's caught getting out of town, and then that town 45 minutes away by a river, and he pulled into a coffee shop that had a camera. So I'm talking about before the murders, en route to the murders. So at some point after it's seen on camera near 270 and before it shows up in Moscow on Indian Hills Drive. So up until now, I haven't had anybody be able to show me that, and it's not in the probable cause affidavit. So I was going through this video, and I'm going to get it pulled up here. And it's a bunch of writing, so I'll likely just read it. There's music, so I'm going to mute it. But this person had made a comment and said, I explained all of this. If anything, it's likely exculpatory information, the fact that that car is on camera in Pullman. The really interesting thing is there were several things, and now I don't agree with everything, but there were a few things where we've discussed this before. So, for instance, the first time it's ever seen on camera, it's going north towards his apartment, not away from it. So this person brought up several interesting points beyond that. But I had always wondered, I'm like, first of all, if he's pinging at his house, and I know we've discussed this, if he's pinging at his house, he can't be 5, 6, 7 minutes away heading north towards his house 2 minutes later, right? And I was like, there's just no time. Well, maybe there's time at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know. But then this person brought up a good point and said, well, how did he avoid all the cameras on the way there to where he was first seen driving north, but yet caught every single camera the whole way home after allegedly committing a murder? So I think it's worthy of us looking at this, and then I'm going to pull up many things. So we're going to look at this video. There's also a new article that came out today by Mike Baker with the New York Times, and it has some new information in it. But he has documentation of what it is that he says, but I haven't yet seen it. He may or may not release it. I don't know. He told me he probably would over the next couple of days. So take it for like what it's worth. I mean, if we can see the reports, then I'm inclined to believe that all of this is true. And he claims that he has them. So I haven't had him lie to me yet. So we'll see. But it was really interesting, and it got all involved with the car. So we're going to talk about the videos, the pings, the good stuff in that article. And then I want to show you kind of the diagrams that I had made of the sightings in Moscow and where that car is said in the PCA to have originated from, if that makes any sense. So let's get this. This is going to be a lot of reading. Not a lot of reading, but enough. So hopefully you don't mind. And hopefully this person doesn't mind because I'm using it. I don't know the rules here. Okay, we can see. All right, just in looking at this is Get a Clue. Has anybody seen this by any chance? Okay. How do I get rid of this? I would like for it to be bigger, but I still don't see it. You know what? Let me get rid of me. Can I get rid of me? Probably not. Okay, well, I'm going to read it, so it really doesn't even matter. It does have some great points. Okay, so let's mute this. So this person, this Get a Clue, says, the evidence and the analysis Well, let's go back. So it says, let's evaluate the evidence per the PCA as it relates to the first sighting of suspect vehicle 1 during the early morning hours shortly before the massacre. The evidence and the analysis of it has gotten lost and obscured with all the drama related to the leaked lies and the profound, don't even know that word, pedantry. This person's obviously way smarter than me, related to the legal machinations, good Lord, of all of this. We need to get back to the evidence or lack thereof and the analysis of what solid evidence does exist in this case. For example, how could the arrested suspect miraculously appear traveling north on Nevada Street at the intersection of Nevada and Stadium Way at 2:44 a.m. without being picked up on video anywhere between the Steptoe Apartments and that location on the WSU campus? So that's basically like what I was just saying is, how did this person, how did this car avoid the cameras, all of the cameras? They say full screen. Oh, I literally thought it was gonna take up my whole screen and then I wouldn't be able to see. Okay, so it's impossible, as the following analysis will prove. Yes, prove this is exculpatory. When we examine the solid, verifiable evidence presented by the state in the PCA that the state believes supports their absurd narrative, we soon realize it doesn't support that absurd narrative, and in fact, quite the opposite, it's exculpatory. You with me? All this drama and noise the past several days or more is meant to distract and detract from that, I assure you. Let's get back to basics, because the basics is what will set an innocent man free, sans a corrupt, rigged jury. As we dive into this, keep in mind that the state's narrative per the PCA is a chain because of the timeline the state has put forth. It's a chain supported by verifiable, solid evidence that we will not refute, but instead evaluate to determine if it supports the state's case. What? Oh, I didn't push pause. The state's case as the PCA claims, or if it contradicts the state's case and is therefore exculpatory to the defendant. This chain is only as strong as any of its links. One link fails, the entire chain fails. So we're just kind of basically getting their explanation here. Okay, what is going on? Is there like somebody... If there's a troll, just don't even... Like, there's always going to be trolls. If we get rid of a troll and block a troll, like, there'll be another troll in its place. So it doesn't even matter. All right. The PCA, via circumstance, claims the white 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra, first captured on video, traveling north on Nevada through the intersection of Nevada and Stadium Way on the WSU campus, is the arrested suspect's vehicle. And he arrived at this place at this point in time, traveling to it from his apartment complex just moments before. They attempt to support this claim with cell phone pings. The state's narrative fails right out of the gate. The first point of failure is the lack of video evidence to support the state's case. How could the arrested suspect have just left his apartment and soon thereafter, a matter of 2 minutes in fact, be captured on WSU traffic cameras at the intersection of Nevada and Stadium Way, traveling north on Nevada through that intersection, meaning he was on Nevada without ever being on Stadium Way, which is impossible when you look at the maps. We're going to do a little bit of that too. He had to traverse a phalanx of cameras, and yet none recorded his vehicle during this time frame. Okay, the following is a copy and paste from the PCA. It will serve as reference for this analysis. Let's just refresh. Investigators were given access to video footage on the Washington State University campus located in Pullman, Washington. A review of that video indicated that at approximately 2:44 a.m. on November 13th, 2022, a white sedan, which was consistent with the description of the white Elantra known as Suspect Vehicle 1, was observed on WSU surveillance cameras traveling north on Northeast Nevada Street at Northeast Stadium Way. At approximately 2:53 a.m., a white sedan, which is consistent with the description of the white Hyundai Elantra, known as Suspect Vehicle 1, was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street in Pullman, Washington towards SR 270. SR 270 connects Pullman, Washington to Moscow, Idaho. This camera footage from Pullman, Washington was provided to the same FBI forensic examiner. The forensic examiner identified the vehicle observed in Pullman, Washington as being a 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Where's Jess? There, I deleted him. Okay. On November 13th, 2022, at approximately 2:42 a.m., the 8458 phone was utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to 1630 Northeast Valley Road, apartment G201, Pullman, Washington, hereafter the Kohberger residence. At approximately 2:47 a.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources that provide coverage southeast of the Kohberger residence, consistent with the 8458 phone leaving the Kohberger residence and traveling south through Pullman, Washington. This is consistent with the movement of the white Elantra. At approximately 2:47 a.m., sorry. Okay. At approximately 2:47 a.m., the 8458 phone stops reporting to the network, which is consistent with either the phone being in an area without cellular coverage, the connection to the network is disabled, such as putting the phone in airplane mode, or that the phone is turned off. I know some people that get like super bent out of shape about that because everybody thinks that when they say that they don't have any cellular data, it's not pinging or anything, that he shut his phone off, and that's super sus. But they continuously point out that even the police and the SPCA say that that's not the only possibility for why they didn't get any pings. It could have also been that there was no cell phone coverage, or it was in airplane mode. I don't understand, like, what is so distracting? What is happening? Just delete people. If like multiple people are like focusing on one person, like, we're not here forever. Just delete them. I literally don't care. All right. The following screen prints reveal the incomparable JLR at the intersection of Nevada and Stadium Way. These pictures were, this is what I wanted to do, which we'll probably have to just read through it. Well, I could pull it up too, because I do want to go into Google Earth. I had previously taken screen recordings of the different intersections to kind of show, because I was curious. I was like, everybody keeps acting like this place isn't set up to get photos of license plates on the rear of vehicles, which makes no sense. Um, okay. So, he's located on the southwest corner of the intersection. The very first sighting of suspect vehicle 1 at 2:44 a.m. indicated the white 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra was traveling north on Nevada through this intersection, which means it would have been traveling directly away from JLR across this intersection, and then 9 minutes later at 2:53 a.m. it would be captured again on the traffic camera traveling towards JLR. It's kind of hard to, now that I'm looking at it like with you guys, it's hard to visualize that. So let's see here. We're going to open another one. He's referring to Jonathan Lee Riches because he does use, or she does use, I don't even know, I guess screenshots of videos that he was taking while he was there. But I'm going to show you on a map. You got to be patient with me. All right, and we got everything on the map. Oh, I'm way far over, that's why. All right. My bad. So let's switch over here real quick. Screen share. Okay, so what we're looking at here is, here's his apartments. Okay, there's Steptoe. At 2:42 in the morning, he's pinging here. At 2:44, 2 minutes later, the car is seen on camera for the first time down here on Nevada Street, heading north, up, as if he were to, let's say, go this way, like he was heading either that way to go to his apartment or this way to go to his apartment. But it was going north. So it was literally right here. Because if it were here and going this way, it would not be going north. So it had to have been either down here, here. All of this would be going north. There's nothing here except for like dorms, but that's besides the point. So the point is that, and this person will show a map, you cannot get from here down to here in 2 minutes. And in traveling north implies he was like, that this car would have been, if it was him, would have been like going home. So my question is like, did he forget his phone? Did he go back to his apartment to get his phone that was on and pinging? So technically like an alibi. What was rude? I'm not even gonna look back. So it really wouldn't make much sense, right? To like go back to the apartment to get the phone just to take it out of the apartment and then turn it off, which is really suspicious. I mean, if you knew that that's what you were going to do, why would you? So there's two, this is Southeast Nevada Street and this is Southeast Nevada Street. If he was going north, he was still heading in the opposite direction of, say, 270, which would take him to Moscow. Like, regardless, the fact that he was heading north, he would have had to get down here first and drive up there. And honestly, if he was here driving north, he would have either come from Moscow or whatever's this way, or he would have been caught on camera this whole way coming down here and then like turning around to head back north. Does that make sense? So the simple point here, yes, I know he goes north on Nevada, then he shows up on the same camera 9 minutes later. I do know that. However, that's even worse, to be honest with you. So shows up there 9 minutes later. Can he get from here all the way up to his apartment, not on camera, get his phone, and then drive back down here in 9 minutes, and then shut the phone off, and also not be captured on camera from here to here? So he managed to evade cameras this entire way in this big loop. But gets caught on this camera. I mean, in fact, this is the camera, Nevada Street, Stadium Way. If we drop in here, I guarantee that there's a camera here too. So I'd have to ask, like why would you leave and go and take main roads that have cameras? I just don't see how that's possible. So this person says, so we talked through that. 2:44, he's traveling north. And then 9 minutes later at 2:53, captured again on the traffic camera, traveling across the intersection south on Nevada towards 270. So technically, I mean, if he went this way, he would have been going here. It wouldn't have necessarily been 270. I'm assuming south on Nevada means right here, and likely turned. Right. Because this here's 270. Even though Nevada itself never intersects 270, and this would be a bizarre way to get to 270, considering a right onto Stadium Way at 2:53 a.m. would put you immediately to 270. That's what I just showed you what we just talked about. Where you make a left and you'd be on your way to Moscow with only one traffic camera in Pullman thereafter to capture you on video at the intersection of 270 and Bishop Boulevard, which I do believe that he was caught on the way back. But since suspect vehicle 1 was not captured on that video at this time or in proximity to this time, we know suspect vehicle 1 did not travel this route. And then there's pictures. For the state's narrative to be true, the arrested suspect began his adventure leaving his apartment complex at 2:42 a.m. And then they repeat what the affidavit says. This is the problem when you're lying and making shit up. Ultimately, you're going to twist yourself into contradictory knots, and you will be exposed as a liar. Payne exposes himself as a liar. This is a lie. This is a fairy tale. How long do you think it takes to get from the Steptoe Apartments to Nevada and Stadium Way? How do you get to Nevada and Stadium Way from the Steptoe Apartments? Are there traffic cameras along the route that would capture your vehicle on video before you get to Nevada and Stadium Way? The answer is yes. Did Payne and Thompson not consider any of this? Do they not care? Do they think people will just swallow this like little baby birds? Apparently so. And you know what? They're right to assume it because that is precisely what is happening and is happening. What has happened and is happening. If it takes 5 minutes per Google to navigate from Steptoe Apartments to the intersection of Nevada and Stadium Way, how is it the arrested suspect did it in 2 minutes? And he took a detour because he was not on Stadium Way when the camera first captured suspect vehicle 1 at 2:44. Instead, he was on Nevada traveling north. So that's really, that's everything that we just talked about. So then, it's on 360. That's why it looks so blurry. So then they share a map. Here's the map. So 5 minutes from Steptoe down to Northeast Stadium Way. Well, Stadium Way, Nevada. Traffic cameras, these can be configured to read license plates. But now we know he was caught on all of these on the way home. So this is the quickest way. The 5 minutes. This is the quickest way. And he was caught on all these cameras going home. So I find it interesting. So what, you're gonna go this way? You already know where all the cameras are, so you're gonna go this way to go there and take the main road back. That just doesn't make any sense. I agree with the pressure to solve for the public. I'll walk you through a little timeline thing after we read this article, which is super interesting. It was something I had not seen before. Look at all of those traffic cameras. It's a gauntlet of cameras. There is no way the arrested suspect gets to Nevada Street per the PCA without his vehicle being captured by these traffic cameras. Even the alternative gray route that would have captured the vehicle. Basically, the point is that this car managed to evade. I know it's a little bit confused. So we're talking about pings. Right now in Pullman, we are talking about pings and camera footage. because this happens to be one of the places where they get both. Never like at the same exact time, but they do get both. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to pull up my timeline. That's what we'll do. So, because they're in order, so it's a little bit easier. So let's stop. And pull up the timeline. Okay, so this is my Google sheet. All right, the yellow are pings, and this green is when the vehicle is on camera. You know what? I can zoom in. Whoa. I reckon that's okay. Please understand that you cannot just say, I was with so-and-so between this time and this time. You can ask them and they'll tell you. It's a lot more than that. And also, at this stage, and I've been looking into this heavily today, at this stage, if he has an alibi, he's still going to trial. He's going to go to trial with that alibi and present alibi witnesses, if he has them, and present data that supports his alibi. So, for instance, like footage if he finds it, or receipts from a store that he was at someplace, or for a hotel somewhere, right? They can't just say, I have an alibi, go ask so-and-so. They'll tell you they were with me all night. It doesn't work like that. They got it. And then he has to go to trial. And essentially what they do is that is his defense. So he'll present his alibi. He'll call witnesses that say, yeah, he was with me. They're subject to cross-examination. They present whatever other receipts, etc., etc. And you would hope that that's enough to create reasonable doubt with the jury. So again, like it's not an instance where you can just, quote, prove your alibi and they'll let you go. Like you're still going to trial, and then you have to hope that it's good enough that the jury is going to find you not guilty, because it creates doubt as to whether you were actually there. So I think that in general, the idea that seems to be spreading around is like, well, if he had an alibi, like they would let him go. No, they wouldn't. They can't. They're not going to do that. And also, if if the defense goes and they say, okay, he's got an alibi, so we're going to here's your response to your alibi demand. That is there a lot of background noise? I can't hear any in my headphones. When they present that, that's going to be their defense. Like they're locked into that. So I was talking about this earlier with somebody, and I was like, for instance, they don't want to, let's just say that they are going to challenge the time of the crime, right? So right now, as we know it, the time of the crime is between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Let me mute his TV. I think he fell asleep. Do you still hear it? or not. Yeah, that might be why I must be tuning out because I couldn't hear it, but I did turn it off because he's falling asleep. I must have bored him. So we're good now. All right, so I was talking to somebody about this today. The time of the crime, as far as we know, now, after the PCA came out, is between 4 and 4:25, right? And how they found that out was because they did whatever they did. They found whatever they found when they did the forensic downloads of the two survivors' phones. Michelle said, so are you suggesting there may be two different vehicles, one pinged near his residence and the other on camera near crime scene? I don't know about it pinging near his residence, but I do think that there could definitely be two different vehicles for sure. And I'll tell you why. We'll get there here shortly. So 4 and 4:25. So essentially, if you're going to present an alibi, the time of the alibi that you need is between 4 and 4:25. Let's say that currently today, he doesn't have an alibi from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. They're going to look at that and be like, okay, well, I mean, that sucks for you, but that's also not the time that they were killed. So we need to know what you were doing in that time frame that we think the crime happened, which was between 4 and 4:25. So what were you doing then? And then they put in this alibi, his official alibi. And something happens. Let's say, for instance, the defense goes through all of this data and figures something out to where the time of the crime, or somebody was incorrect about their times, whatever the case may be, where it changes. Let's say it goes back to the original between 3 and 4 a.m. What would then happen if he did have an alibi during that time? I just think, me personally, I think that like the whole alibi defense thing, I mean, if you're going to have to go to trial anyway, right? And you having an alibi, like we've already discussed, is that you cannot just go in there and say, you can call, Jessica, and she'll tell you that we were at her house the entire night. And Jessica come on the stand and say, yes, he was with me all night. And the judge be like, oh, you know what? She looks believable. I believe her. She wouldn't lie. Why are we here? Let him go. Set him free. So I think there's many other like different strategies, because it has to be a strategy. It's going to be a strategy no matter what. And I think that there are different strategies that they're likely to take. Now, in that filing where they asked for time and extension, or to basically excuse them from having to provide an alibi, there was a part that says that complying with that and doing so and providing whatever the alibi was could potentially fall into like providing private information or whatever. And somebody said that Operation Get Thugs, like if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. Like, we're talking about something and we're all trying to be here open-minded and like talk about the actual things that are in the affidavit. I'm going off on this alibi thing just because someone had, actually, I think it was you, brought up if he had an alibi, like you would have just said so and been out of here. And it's not the case, and it's not that simple. And I feel like simplifying it that way when it's not that simple gives people the wrong impression of like what is actually going on. So we're trying to educate and understand it a little bit better. It doesn't mean that everybody here is a Bryan Kohberger groupie. It means we want to talk about real things and real facts, and we want to use our brains instead of just eating what we're told, saying that we don't care and we know that he's guilty, but then still trolling on people's pages when they're talking about what's going on with Bryan Kohberger. So like, you can, and this goes for everybody, you can be an active and productive part of the conversation, or like you don't have to be here. I personally, I do not care. I don't monetize. Nobody has to be here. I don't need to cater to anybody to make you stay. I have a job. I just like having discussions with people, and it's super distracting to the people that actually want to talk about stuff when there's people that go on and on and on and say hateful things to the people that are trying to talk about stuff they don't agree with, when it's just much easier for you to just hit the X button and go. Anyway, my brain, there's a lot of people in here whose like brains work like mine. It is incredibly distracting, and it's hard to get back to center where we need to be. So let me just go back to the timeline, because we were talking about the pings and the surveillance footage. This is pretty easy to look at. The yellow is the pings, the green is the surveillance footage. 2:42, it's pinging at his house. 2:44, it's seen on camera going north. We've gone over that a bajillion times. 3 minutes later, which again, you cannot get from his apartment down to Nevada Street in 2 minutes. You also can't get from Nevada Street back to his apartment in 3 minutes. But this here is saying that it was using resources southeast of his residence, which is consistent with his phone leaving his apartment and going south. But the thing about that is, and then it shuts off. The thing about that is that when you're looking at like the pings, which I know I have a diagram somewhere that a expert created for, I believe it was the Idaho Statesman. And it's like two big circles, and they show you how far of a radius it covers, which is really interesting because it's something like 27 miles. It's like a huge thing. And then it like intersects in the middle. I'll show you the diagram, but it intersects in the middle. It looks like those old graphs we would make like in school, where it was like two big circles, but then they met in the middle. They like overlapped each other, and you would put like differences on either side of the circle, and then the similarities in the part where it intersects. And it is, I guess, a Venn diagram. That is right. I think that is exactly what it is. I saw Venn and it like made it pop into my head. So he made that, and essentially you could be pinging in Pullman and be at his apartment on Nevada Street. Like, you could be in a huge area and still ping in Pullman. So I don't know how accurate that is. Let me get back on camera. So I don't know how accurate that is, but regardless, the fact of the matter is that it turns off after that. So, and then At 2:53, we're still at the camera that's at Nevada Street. Then at 3:26, we pop up on Indian Hills Drive in Moscow. So I feel like there's the answer, right? So I don't see anywhere where it says that it was on camera in between Pullman and Moscow. So you have a camera at 2:53 that sees him going towards 270, which happens to be a main road and is a road that connects Pullman to Moscow. And then you have him on camera at 3:26 a.m. in Moscow at Indian Hills Drive. So there is no in between. The map. Let's see, because I have to go back and forth. So, oh, did she say maps and times? I'm not that prepared. I figured everybody already poured over all this stuff. Here's the thing. Let's zoom out here. There's Pullman. There's Moscow. They're like the towns, right? Like, this is all rural. This is all of this. I mean, those are the two towns, okay? That's like what they have. So the idea for me, especially like living where I live and all, like the idea for me that he'd be in an area where there was no service is like not outrageous for me to think. I mean, look, this is all rural. We also talked about this, me and somebody else yesterday were talking about the fact that we know he has a hard time sleeping, right? So it would be curious to find out when they did go through his phone and did like a forensic download on it. It would be interesting if every night at 2:30-ish, he puts his phone in airplane mode to go to sleep. I was telling people that my phone, for whatever reason, like I updated and it vibrates. I cannot get it to stop. Every notification that comes through, it buzzes. And I used to like that. But like not so much anymore, because I'm talking like if one person replies to a tweet, bzz, somebody says something on Discord, bzz, 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 it's like it is the most annoying, and I can't figure out how to turn it off. So I often, like when it's time for me to go to sleep, I will put my phone in do not disturb, which isn't the same as airplane mode. But I'm here to tell you that if I couldn't get it to stop on do not disturb, I'd be putting it in airplane mode. The only thing that makes me like nervous about that, which Bryan Kohberger is not me. We've likely been through different things in life. But the only thing that makes me nervous about that is like if my mother needs me in the middle of the night, because she can't drive 7 hours to let me know that something has happened. But maybe he doesn't care if his parents need him in the middle of the night. So I don't know. I don't know if he does, but it would make sense to me. I mean, I wouldn't have a hard time believing him being like, listen, I have a hard ass time sleeping. I personally, Sleuthy, sleep 4 hours a night. And that's because I have a difficult time going to sleep because I do have ADD. So if he has a hard time going to sleep, only sleeps about 4 hours, I can imagine by like 2:30, you're like, you know what? I got shit to do in the morning. I'm cutting his phone off because I'm hearing it vibrate or I can't stay off of it. Like maybe that's a routine. I know it's one of the things that they suggest to me, you know, no no TV, no phone, read something boring, yada, 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 which is what I do, actually. I read something not always boring, but, so these are the two towns. It's like really all there is. What was the time? If we're just talking about cameras, so the phone's shut off at 2:47. However, he's still in Pullman because at 2:53, he's seen again at Nevada Street in Pullman. So he's still like over here, well over here, like at this intersection. Okay. And then at I'm lying to you. At 3:26 is the first time he's ever seen in Moscow, all the way over here. What it does is it implies, like all the other things it implies, it wants you to jump to a conclusion, okay? It even wants you to we talked about this too the other day. It even has you jump to a conclusion that the K-bar knife is the murder weapon, but it never actually says that at all. We still don't know what the murder weapon was, or if there was more than one. So 2:53, still in Pullman. 3:26, he's appears in Moscow. And where he appears, right here's the house. Right there. No, right there. Okay. He is seen like here in the curve. I've looked at it before, here in the curve, because he goes, what they say that it does is that it's seen here, like comes around here, then it's caught again on camera. It's Steiner. So that's probably the A&W, like where they were taking surveillance footage in December. So Steiner, which if you take Steiner, cross over here, and there's Taylor Ave. Like it will run right into Taylor Ave. Here's Taylor Ave. Here's the Banfield where they were when they were pulled over. Here's where the cops were at this time. Okay. 3:26, he's here. So we'll be gracious and say that at 3:27, he was right here. And the police were still right here until 3:31. And I know that because I have the report. So he drove right past them. Like they were still sitting there. So, something that was interesting is the first time after that one, after Indian Hills Drive at 3:26, the first time, okay, I'm trying to think of how I want to explain this, and hopefully it makes sense. So what they say is, let's just pull up the probable cause affidavit, is that between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m., the car's seen like multiple times on vehicles or on cameras, right? So we know that. And I'm going to pull up the specific words. Again, we're jumping to the conclusion that the vehicle that's seen at 3:26 on Indian Hills Drive, the one that's seen at 3:28 at Steiner Ave, we're assuming that that car, the one that would have driven right past the police, is the same car that was seen at 4:04, right? We're assuming that it's the same car that was carrying the killer, which, to be honest, I still don't, I don't know why I don't know what led us to believe that a person driving around was the killer, because like, we don't have any instance where it goes off camera. We don't even have any instance where they don't even say that it goes off camera, that it stops and parks for an extended period of time. Like, for all we know, that car was on camera the entire time and no one ever got out. So, like, there's no amount of time between each step that they take. So if they're saying, okay, well, he was seen on camera at 3:29 and then he was seen on camera at 3:42, like, we don't know. That would tell us exactly how long it took to do the 3-point turn and the this and the that. Like, if they were to have said at 4:04 we see the camera, and then the camera or the car disappears from sight for approximately 17 minutes, then we know it likely went like to that back parking lot or whatever. It's a little bit easier to assume that person, the reason we didn't see somebody getting out or whatever is because he purposely went out of sight of the cameras. Here's my issue. It says, a review of footage from multiple videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20. So we know that. These sightings show suspect 1 makes an initial 3 passes by the King Road residence and then leaves via Walenta Drive. Okay, let's talk about that. The first time it's seen on camera in the King Road neighborhood is at 3:29 a.m. Are we all in agreement? So we know it was at Steiner at 3:28. They drove past the police, we're told, and would have appeared on camera for the first time at 3:29. Okay. These sightings show suspect vehicle 1 makes an initial 3 passes by the King Road residence and then leave via Walenta Drive. Let's see what that looks like. 3:28, I'm coming down Taylor Ave. 3:29, I'm seen on camera the first time. So I'm going to assume that it's right here, right? 1, passing the house. 2, I'm passing the house. And 3, I'm passing the third time. Well, I can't leave via Walenta Drive because I'm stuck here. I'd have to pass a 4th time to get to Walenta Drive. You picking up what I'm putting down? Can I make my cursor large? I don't know. I really don't. Let me mess around with the settings. While I try to make the map big, do y'all understand? So you can't, if you pass it 3 times, you're stuck, like at the King Road Apartments. You cannot leave via Walenta Drive without passing it a 4th time, okay? So instead, I'm going to type in mouse or pointer. Is it pointer? Definitely pointer. Mouse pointer size. Oh, it's on 1, so. Oh, dear God. It still looks small. It is huge. It's literally taking up, oh my God. It is taking up like my whole computer. And it still looks small. Does it look exactly the same? Because if so, I got to change it back. It's literally, and like, if you could see this, you would laugh. It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I can't imagine, if I was that blind, like, I don't know that I'd be on the computer. Holy shit. What if I make it yellow? Or pink? I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, I'll probably make it yellow. Wasting time. I'm way too easily distracted. It blends in. You guys. There. I'm sorry. It doesn't look like it's going to change. Okay. So instead of what we just said, so 328, 329, I'm seeing the first time, pass 1, pass 2, pass 3. I can't leave via Walenta Drive because I'm stuck back here or even back here. Like, there's nowhere for me to get my car to Walenta Drive unless I like drove through the trees. Or what would align with that more would be if I'm coming from maybe back here. The way it reads is that the car was already here. It originated here. It did not come from Taylor Ave if it only passed 3 times and then left via Walenta Drive. So instead, I'm parked back here in the parking lot, and I am seen at 329 for the first time in the King Road neighborhood. I pass 3 times. On the 3rd time, I leave via Walenta Drive. And the reason that I know that there's no 4th time is because the affidavit then goes on to say, suspect vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04. So the 4th time that I'm seen on camera in the neighborhood is when I'm coming back at 4:04. So in order for me to only go by 3 times and then get out of here via Walenta Drive is if I start back here behind the house or over here at the apartments or like wherever, back here, like somewhere stuck in back here. I pass 1 time. I'm seen at 329. Then I pass a 2nd time. Then I pass a 3rd time and I get out of here via Walenta Drive. Then at 4:04, I'm coming back. Make sense? I wonder what you guys think. Tell me what you think about that. Because that means, so if that were the case, that would mean that there was a different car that was driving around at some point that looked similar. And they thought that it was the same person, but really they originated from the neighborhood. They didn't originate from Pullman. They didn't originate from Steiner Avenue. They had to have started here at the house in order to pass 3 times and leave via Walenta Drive and then come back at 4:04. And when it comes back at 4:04, it says it can be seen driving eastbound on King Road. So let me pull this up. So I'm back at 4:04. It's probably like this house probably that has the camera. So I'm back at 4:04. I can be seen driving east. That's this way. I get to 500 Queen Road and I turn around, drive back west. When I get here in front of the house, I do something weird. I like try to park or turn around. I don't know what that means because like surely this wasn't such a crowded, like, why would you fail to stop or turn around in front of the house? That doesn't even make any sense. That makes sense if I like pull up and I stop and I'm like not quite sure like if that's your house. And I'm like looking and I'm like, wait, maybe it's not. Oh, maybe it is. And I try to pull in and then I pull back. You know what I mean? Like, but not, I've been stalking this house. I've already driven by, a half hour earlier and left. I already know the deets. Like, I see how many cars are here. Like, what are you doing? And then they come down here and make a 3-point turn around. It says, the vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen Road and King Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn. So 1, 2, 3, and driving east down Queen Road again. And then it says suspect vehicle 1 is next seen departing the area of the King Road residence at approximately 4:20 at a high rate of speed. The problem is that it doesn't tell us how many minutes it took from 4:04 a.m. until 4:20 a.m. to drive by again, do the 3-point turn, stop and turn around. Like, what if it took 15 minutes all the way up to 4:19? I'm really curious about that. Like, what do you think? Like, what, it does not say that the car was off camera. I mean, it tells you its movements. It just doesn't tell you how many times or how many minutes it took to do all of those. Meanwhile, you got the DoorDash driver driving around. So I don't know how I can jump to that conclusion that the car is like off camera, because they're telling me that it's seen, but because they're not telling me what times it's seen on camera, I don't know how long it took for them to do everything. I'm talking about just the car maneuvers before it speeds out of there. It doesn't say the car ever parked. It doesn't say that the car was ever out of sight. I mean, it does later on, but as far as its movements in the neighborhood, it does not say that the car was out of sight anywhere, or that they lost it, or that anybody got out, or even really that it like came to a stop. You know what I mean? So isn't there a road that connects King Road and Walenta between the houses and apartments? If so, the third pass could end. Well, so there's not a drivable road. This is a house. This is the parking lot behind the house. It's not. You could run. You could run from the house all the way up through here and then get over here. But you cannot drive like through this house. The only way you're getting to Walenta, if you're in this back parking lot, let's say, the only way you're getting to Walenta Road or Walenta Drive is to leave here. Like you gotta get out and go around. Make sense? So that's something that bothers me. It bothers me that I don't know how many, because like here we are, we're like, okay, so 4:04, it's seen, and then we assume, it's funny because we assume that like almost immediately that it's out of view. And what we do is we say, well, then let's say it took him 1 or 2 minutes. Let's say it took him 1 minute to park and get out. So in theory, he was in the house from 4:05 to 4:19, let's say. So he had X amount of minutes to be able to do everything. But I just don't see how that's so, because when it's seen at 4:04, it's just now coming back to the neighborhood after it already left. Absolutely not. PB&J said, Sleuthy, if you were going to kill, would you trap yourself in a dead end that you would have to turn around in? Absolutely not. In fact, like when I would go to the city, because I used to live like just outside of Philly, and I would go there, like if I would go to pick somebody up or drop them off, it was well known that what we do is you don't even put the car in park. you just leave your foot on the brake in drive, wait for the person to go in and come back out, and then you go. Because if somebody comes up to the car, you don't want to have to worry about fiddling with your gear shifter, right? You can just hit the gas. So I would imagine that if I was going to do something that serious, I most certainly would pick a better spot to park. Probably Walenta. I probably wouldn't have taken my car at all. If he can run if he can run a mile in 6 minutes, why the hell didn't he park a mile away and go on foot? That don't make no sense. I wouldn't be seen on camera in that neighborhood at all. And I feel like if you're talking about someone that like premeditated something, was obsessing over this and that, and like if he had been, and the 12 times he pinged in the area, I hear people all the time say he was stalking them. He was like sitting behind the house like a creep, like jerking off in the car. Like it's the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And you would think that while he was doing all of that, he would have taken notice of all the cameras in the area, in the neighborhood, and made sure not to drive his car right past them. I think there's so much evidence the public does not know yet, possibly more pings and camera footage. They just need to share enough to show cause. Bob Mata is the guy that does the Defense Diaries podcast. I really like him. He's really funny, and also he explains things really, really well. And I was listening to I binged on his podcast. It was funny because I said something on Twitter, and he had been following me for a while, and he was like, the fact that you just said this means now that I know that you've not listened to my podcast. And so I went straight to the podcast and I binge listened, and I was hesitant because I don't really like podcasts. I mean, a person has to sound a particular way for me to listen, because I'm very visual. Like if there's nothing going on the screen, my brain is I'm like a hummingbird. Okay. So if I'm just listening to a voice, unless it's the guy from Dateline, it has to be really particular. But I was hooked because he's a defense attorney, right? And also, I didn't know this until after that, but his dad was the defense attorney for John Wayne Gacy. But he's a cool guy and funny as shit. And he was explaining kind of everything. And he was going through the affidavit. And he was like, I'm trying to get, I hope I don't butcher his words. And I would much rather play it, but I know I don't have it right now. But I did share it. He's like, I'm trying to get people away from this whole, that they're hiding this bombshell evidence from the PCA. Because it's not true. He's like, whatever they had, all the good shit that they had when they wrote that probable cause affidavit is in it. And I'm of the opinion that the reason that people don't want to believe that is because I think there's a variety of reasons. I think one of the reasons is that they're scared that it's that easy to arrest a person. They want to think that the affidavit has to be more than what it is because they took someone's freedom, right? So I also think that another part of it is that we, Jennifer, it's called the Defense Diaries. I was able to find more, all of the episodes are not in the same place. So he's on YouTube and he has a podcast playlist or whatever, but then he's also on Apple Podcasts, and he's also on Spotify. And Spotify is the one where I found like the most, like, go watch it on Spotify. It's called The Defense Diaries, or just Defense Diaries. And so, and he piqued my interest too, because he said that he guaranteed that the person that wrote the affidavit was the prosecutor. And I was like, what? That is bad. That's so bad. Like, I was way more comfortable thinking that Brett Payne wrote it and didn't care to proofread it. You're telling me that Santa wrote it? Are you kidding me? And he was like, yeah, basically. So essentially what they do is that the investigators bring what they have, because, you know, they're like not going to arrest anybody, especially on this, but they need to get the input of the person that's going to bring the charges, that's going to say, okay, yeah, you have enough in your investigation, go ahead and write the affidavit and arrest, because now I have enough, because if I have to go to court, like, I can justify you having arrested them, right? And he's like, they bring him all this information. He knows what the judge wants to hear, and how it needs to be laid out, and this and that. Can't get Sleuthy's attention. I pulled up Google Maps, and white Elantra traveling on 1410 Bishop Boulevard 8 months ago by Paradise Creek Quality, and guy in Elantra looks like Bryan. What was 8 months ago? November? Here's the thing. It's not weird if Bryan's in Moscow, right? I don't think it's weird. So, oh, I forgot about the article, y'all. Listen, I'm really going to throw everybody, because I doubt most people have seen it, but it's really going to throw you. And if I'm smart, I'll just end the live stream and make you all come back to talk about it. But it's going to take a minute, like, to kind of sit with you. Okay. But he's like, you know, get that out of your head. Like, get that out of your head that they had all the evidence and all this bombshell evidence, and they chose to leave it out because they had what they had. They put it all in the affidavit. And the idea is, is that you have enough to be highly suspicious that this person probably committed it. So the theory is that you're going to arrest them, and you're going to get all these search warrants and things like that. And you're going to find more and more and more information. Irish. Late again. Tisk, tisk. So, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So, like, you arrest this person, right? And then you're like, we really believe he did it. So we're going to get a bunch of search warrants and stuff, and we're obviously going to find more evidence. That's, like, perfectly fine and normal. So he was basically trying to get everybody out of it. And he was better about saying, you know, my whole thing, and I, like, argued with people about this, is like, we would be having a discussion, and they're like, well, I'm sure the police have that. You don't know what they have. And I'm like, well, you don't know what the fuck they have it either. I mean, just because you think that they should have it doesn't mean that they do. So why are we going to sit here and assume, like, I'm not going to sit here and assume that they have a bunch of Bryan's DNA inside the house, because I do not know that. And then if they don't have it, and you have jurors who are assuming, expecting that the police have this and that, or they checked this and that, or they gathered this and that and found this and that, and then they don't have it in trial, then they could potentially be like, shit, maybe he's not guilty then. And that might not necessarily be the case. So it's also why they don't want you to have the expectation of like, just because there's no DNA evidence doesn't mean that somebody didn't do something. Just because there's DNA evidence doesn't mean that somebody did do something. See, here's the problem is that you have to wait. So they have all these things, like the pings, let's say. They have all these pings. We can talk to people who have analyzed pings in the past. But what it's going to ultimately come down to is a jury of people that probably have no idea about phone pings. And they're going to listen to at least one, if not two, likely two, ping experts. And they're both going to explain these pings, and they're going to both give two completely different explanations. One of them is going to tell you that they're entirely accurate, and the other one's going to tell you it's garbage. And what it really boils down to is who explains it better and who the jury believes more when it comes down to these experts. They're paid to provide an analysis that is good for whatever side is paying. And that's just the way that it is. So I am super interested in the fact that I feel that first vehicle that was seen at 329 and then passing 3 times and leaving via Walenta Drive originated there might be an entirely different vehicle from the one that was in Pullman. Because if you think about it, if that car was there, then it obviously couldn't have been the car that was driving around in Pullman. So I need to read you this article. I'm about to show it to you. Y'all are gonna shit. I was like, what? Another wrench. And then I said to him, so it's going to be Mike Baker with the New York Times. And I said to him, now, Mike, where's the receipts? You're saying you got this paperwork, you got this report or whatever. Like, I'm going to have to see that, because if your report says what you're saying in this article, that's extremely interesting. Wait till you all hear it. Maybe I'm just dramatic, perhaps, but I don't think so. So, inside the hunt for the Idaho killer. After 4 students were stabbed to death in a house near a college campus, investigators scooped up data and forensic evidence hoping for leads. A new DNA technique finally brought a breakthrough. Oh, I'm so excited for this. In the weeks after 4 University of Idaho students were found slaughtered in a house near campus last November, a growing roster of investigators desperately searching for answers had yet to identify a suspect or even find the murder weapon. Publicly, the authorities were assuring worried residents in the small college town that they were making progress. Privately, they were exhausting their prospects, scouring through the backgrounds of those with the thinnest possible connections to the case. Through the first 2 weeks of December, investigators put some of their focus on classmates of the victims. They also widened the search to examine a man in another state who had been known to send harassing messages to women, but had visited Idaho only twice in his life. They looked at a woman previously charged with assaults in the region. They looked at a man once accused of wielding a knife. They looked at sex offenders. They looked at a white supremacist. Each turned out to be a dead end. Then, after spending Weeks sifting through an array of evidence that seemed to lead nowhere, investigators announced an arrest in late December on the other side of the country, Bryan Kohberger, a PhD student from a nearby university. He was identified only after investigators turned to an advanced method of DNA analysis that had rarely been used in active murder investigations. That was going to get so good. The story of how dozens of officers from local, state, and federal agencies took the quadruple murder investigation into extraordinary territory is only now becoming more apparent through recently obtained records and interviews with people familiar with the investigation who discussed key details that emerged before the issuance of a gag order in the case. The case has shown the degree to which law enforcement investigators have come to rely on the digital footprints that ordinary Americans leave in nearly every facet of their lives. Online shopping, car sales, carrying a cell phone, drives along city streets, and amateur genealogy all played roles in an investigation that was solved in the end as much through technology as traditional sleuthing. Now indicted on 4 counts of murder, Mr. Kohberger has declined to enter a plea but contended previously through his lawyer that he would be exonerated. Investigators have yet to detail a possible motive. To this day, family members of the victims remain unaware of any prior connections that the accused killer had with the 4 young people who were killed. The process of identifying and arresting a suspect took over 6 weeks. Weeks of increasing frustration and painstaking examination of evidence as the community pushed for answers. We're so close. The first 911 call came in around noon, some 7 hours after the murders. Madison Mogan, 21, Kaylee Gonsalves, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20, had been stabbed to death overnight in their bedrooms. Initially, the Moscow Police Department described the attacks as targeted and assured residents that there was no risk to the public, but with no indication of who had committed the attack or why, the authorities eventually backtracked. "We cannot say that there's no threat to the community," the police chief James Fry said at a news conference on November 16th, 3 days after the killings. The department, which had only a few dozen officers, enlisted the Idaho State Police and the FBI to help, bringing in dozens of additional investigators. Forensic teams processed evidence from the bedrooms, snapped photos around the home's back door, and hunted for footprints. Others searched for surveillance video from around town. A week after the killings, records show investigators were on the lookout for a certain type of vehicle, Nissan Sentras, from the model years 2019 to 2023. Quietly, they ran down details on thousands of such vehicles, including the owners' addresses, license plate numbers, and the color of each sedan. What do y'all think about that? Thank you, C. What do you think? We still got a ways to go. Well, that is no Elantra. I'll read it louder for the people in the back. A week after the killings, records show investigators were on the lookout for a certain type of vehicle, Nissan Sentras, from the model years 2019 to 2023. Quietly, they ran down details on thousands of such vehicles, including the owners' addresses, license plate numbers, and the color of each sedan. moving on. And that's the part. So I'm going to keep trying to convince him. I think he probably will. But he says he'll release these documents that confirm this. But further scrutiny of the video footage produced more clarity, and on November 25th, the police in Moscow asked law enforcement agencies to look for a different type of car with a similar shape. White Hyundai Elantras from the model years 2011 to 2013. No, ma'am, it is not a typo. He assured me that he has the documentation and will likely release it. Just across the state border at Washington State University, campus police officers began looking through their records for Elantras registered there. Among those they found was one registered to Mr. Kohberger, who had moved to the area earlier in 2022 to pursue a PhD in criminology. They checked Mr. Kohberger's car more closely, according to a court affidavit, including visiting the parking lot near his apartment in the early morning hours of November 29th. But the vehicle was a 2015 model, not the earlier models being sought in Moscow. The next day, records show investigators in Moscow were also looking closely at another vehicle, Kaylee's car. She had purchased a 2015 Range Rover in the days before her death. Detectives gathered information on the registration, history, and legal owners, clearly interested in the history of who had owned the car. But once again, the information provided few answers. With students at the University of Idaho preparing for final exams, there was a permanent sense of apprehension in the air as people began locking their doors, acquiring pepper spray, and asking on social media how such a brazen killer could remain undetected for so long in a town that had not seen a murder in 7 years. The hunt broadened as investigators vacuumed up more records and data. They had already sought cell phone data for all phones that pinged certain towers within a half mile of the victim's house from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. Me too, girl. According to search warrant filings. They collected victims' bank records, email correspondence, and social media account data. On December 5th, detectives made a new request for surveillance video, seeking all footage recorded on UPS delivery trucks in the days before and after the killings. The next day, after getting back data on Kaylee's account on the Tinder app, detectives asked for details on 19 specific account holders, including their locations, credit card information, and any private images, pictures, or videos associated with the accounts. The request allowed the inquiry to go much broader than any ordinary search for information, using a single warrant to target 19 different people, said Oren Kerr, a law professor at the University of California, Berkeley. You couldn't get one warrant to search 19 houses, he said. Investigators were also working with a key piece of evidence, a K-bar knife sheath branded with a U.S. Marine Corps logo that had been found next to two of the victims. They initially began looking for local stores that may have sold the weapon and then fanned out. A request to Amazon sought the order histories of account holders who had purchased such knives. A follow-up request to eBay focused on a series of specific users seeking their purchase histories. Some had connections to the area, including one in Idaho and two in Washington State, while others were from far away, including an account in Japan. Because of redactions, it is unclear if Mr. Kohberger's name came up in those records. The overall data track was growing enormous, demonstrating the extensive breadth of data on consumer platforms that can be made accessible to law enforcement agencies when they are at a stage of hunting for breadcrumbs. You could say this is uncharted territory, Mr. Kerr said. They are novel legal questions when there are so many records out there. At the same time, DNA from the scene was being processed. Forensic teams had examined the knife sheath and found DNA that did not belong to any of the inhabitants of the house. They ran the sample through the FBI database, which contains millions of DNA profiles of past criminal offenders, but according to 3 people briefed on the case, they did not get a match. At that point, investigators decided to try genetic genealogy, a method that until now has been used primarily to solve cold cases, not active murder investigations. Among the growing number of genealogy websites that help people trace their ancestors and relatives via their own DNA, some allow users to select an option that permits law enforcement to compare crime scene DNA samples against the website's data. A distant cousin who has opted into the system can help investigators building a family tree from crime scene DNA to triangulate and identify a potential perpetrator of a crime. In one of the best-known uses of genealogy in solving a cold case, detectives in 2018 were able to arrest a suspect in a string of rapes and murders years before in California that had been attributed to the so-called Golden State Killer. Once a suspect is identified, a direct genetic comparison can be used as confirmation before making an arrest. With few formal regulations, the use of mass genealogy databases has raised concerns about privacy and whether limits should be placed on how the method is used. But authorities across the country say they have found potential in the system to produce leads that are unattainable through traditional investigative efforts. Barbara Ray Venter, a genealogy consultant who worked on the Golden State Killer case, said there was now growing interest in using genealogical DNA, not just in cold cases, but also in active crime investigations. That is why the Idaho case is so interesting, she said. To do the genealogical analysis, the Idaho State Police contracted with a private company, Othram, in Texas, which we've talked about before, which had a lab able to produce a more extensive DNA profile from the knife sheath than the state lab was set to examine. FBI personnel worked with the profile that Othram had produced, according to 2 people familiar with the investigation, spending days building out a family tree that began with a distant relative. By the morning of December 19th, records show investigators had a name, Bryan Kohberger. He had a white Elantra. He was a student at a university 8 miles from the murder scene. Mr. Kohberger was already out of town, his semester complete. He had driven home with his father to Pennsylvania, stopped twice by the police along the way for what officers said was tailgating. Just as agents began to scour his background more thoroughly, he had been terminated from his position as a teaching assistant after what was described as altercations with a professor. On December 23rd, investigators sought and received Mr. Kohberger's cell phone records. The results added more to their suspicions. His phone was moving around in the early morning hours of November 13th, but was disconnected from cell towers, perhaps turned off in the 2 hours around when the killings occurred. 4 days later, agents in Pennsylvania managed to retrieve some trash from Mr. Kohberger's family residence, sending the material to the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab. Checking it against their original DNA profile, the lab was able to reach a game-changing conclusion. The DNA in the trash belonged to a close relative of whoever had left DNA on the sheath. Mr. Kohberger was arrested on December 30th. We have an individual in custody who committed these horrible crimes, and I do believe our community is safe, the police chief, Mr. Fry, announced. But we still do need to be vigilant. right? For anybody that missed it, in case you're just now coming in, we read this whole thing, but I think the most jaw-dropping was this: that a week after the killings, records show investigators were on the lookout for a certain type of vehicle, Nissan Sentras, from the model years 2019 to 2023. That's a new car. And again, for background, for anybody that just got in here, so this is an article that was written today by Mike Baker. It's in the New York Times. He sent it to me. He knows my hesitancy to believe like any of this stuff. He did say that he has the documentation that reflects this information, saying that they were looking for a 2019 to 2023 Nissan Sentra, and that he was possibly going to release that document over the next couple days. I feel he will. So, the thoughts, well, I'll just say my thoughts, but others' thoughts as well, is that they really weren't looking at Bryan Kohberger at all until December 19th. So let's look at the timeline here. And we're not even going to go all the way back, but I told you guys that something bothered me about the fact that they were doing those re-interviews. So they announced on December 12th that they were going back and re-interviewing people they had already interviewed. Okay. And I found it strange that kind of like everything dominoed after that point. And I was like, I think somebody snitched him out for sure. Like whenever they did their re-interviews, I think someone got, and this is just my opinion, I think someone got scared when he left with his dad. Thought he wasn't going to ever come back. So we're just gonna, I'm not gonna like show you, I'm just gonna verbalize it to you, the timeline, and then we'll go. The document that I was reading is the new, did he even post it? Go to the New York Times. He sent it to me, and then I downloaded it, so I don't even know if like he had published it yet. So it's probably, the cat's out of the bag. But yeah, okay. So they said they saw it today. Yeah, it was posted today, this afternoon, on the New York Times. Mike Baker. I would imagine he tweeted out the link too, I guess. But it's usually behind a paywall, so that's why I showed it here. So let's think about this, and then we're going to go, because I don't think anybody wants to watch me for 2 hours. I don't know how you all are still here. So we got December 12th. They are doing re-interviews of people they had already interviewed. That's on the YouTube channel for the Moscow PIO or whatever. Lanier. I could picture his face saying it. So December 12th, they started re-interviewing people. Also on December 12th, I fucking hate 4chan. But nevertheless, on December the 12th, on 4chan, was some jackass saying that the killer is hiding in the Poconos in shithole Pennsylvania or whatever. I'm sure everybody that's here has saw it, right? There was that random post about shithole Pennsylvania. and the killer hiding in the Poconos. So then the next day, December 13th, is when the two Kohberger men are in the Elantra because they're seen in Loma, Colorado. And then December 14th, the next day, is when they get that call that whatever was going on at Kopaka's apartment, and they start their, 8-hour standoff until 3-something a.m. the next day. So we're going in day. We're going day to day. So we did the 12th, the 13th, the 14th. Now we're at early morning hours, the 15th, after 8+ hours of doing a standoff with Bryan Kohberger, and they decide to shoot him in an evacuated building. So that was the 15th, like 3-ish a.m. or whatever. Also on the 15th, the Kohberger guys are pulled over twice in Indiana. The next day, on December the 16th, Bryan Kohberger is seen on surveillance in Albrightsville. So they're in Pennsylvania. On December 19th is when Moscow PD gets the call from Othram saying, with their DNA special machinery and all, and the family tree that the FBI had been putting together, they came up with a name, and the name was Bryan Kohberger. So they then said, shit, Bryan Kohberger? Let's look it up. They then look in and they see, oh, he's got a white car. It's an Elantra, but we did look at this like once before, but it was outside of what we were looking for. In my opinion, and others, that day on the 19th, they found out his name. They saw that he drove a white Elantra. It was outside of the model years. They were looking for 2011 to 2013. But they had this tree, this family tree that FBI had been putting together. They had this name from Othram. And I suspect that they then went to their FBI vehicle expert that helped them all along and said, are you sure that car might not be a 2015? Maybe. And what you have to realize and remember is that when that FBI agent, that expert, was brought the surveillance footage from Pullman, they did not say that it was a 2011 to 2016. Okay. They specifically said that it was a 2014 to 2016. So you're the FBI agent, vehicle person, and I'm like, hey, can you look at this video footage? What kind of car is that? Oh, looks like a 2014 to 2016 white Elantra to me. Oh, well, you told us. Well, we thought it was a Nissan Sentra that was in the King Road neighborhood, but then you told us it was a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. So like that's what we've been looking for. Could these two cars be the same? They're both they're driving around at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, it is a shitty video. We're going to have to put out stock photos. But I guess it could be. So why don't we just extend it? I guess we could extend it to 2011 to 2016. I guess it could be. So then, 4 days later, on December 23rd, is when they go and get their very first search warrant for Bryan Kohberger, and they go for his phone. And they get actually what they first did was they tried to find him in that 3 to 5 a.m. time frame in the tower dump that they had gotten, because they had his phone number and they wouldn't have had to get like another warrant, right? So if he would have popped up in that data dump, the tower dump, that would have been some like free data. We didn't even have to go to the judge and ask for anything, but he didn't show up. So I'm not sure, because they haven't released it, I'm not sure where the probable cause was found. I look forward to finding that out. How they established probable cause to be able to get that search warrant for his phone for an extended period of time, which ended up being, the start of it, which was like June 23rd, right? I suspect that they brought this newly founded information from 4 days prior to the judge and said, we need to check his cell phone because Othram Labs just called us and they, the FBI built this tree and they gave us a name and it's this guy that's over here and we have his cell phone and this and that and he's not there to time the murder, blah, 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 blah. That's got to be it. So they pull that. They realize he drives this white car. The way I see it is that they couldn't have gotten the footage from Clarkston and the Albertsons and the coffee shop and all that stuff. They couldn't have got that until after they got the data back from 12/23, because they didn't know until they were processing through that data. And it could have been the 23rd, 24th, 25th. We don't know. It could have taken several days to put all that data together that they got from the warrant. So I suspect that whatever day after the 23rd, they were looking at the cell phone pings, and then they went and visited places along the area of where they thought that that it was pinging, right? And they were like, do you have any camera footage? Which the reason I bring that up is because it's interesting to me that they would have footage that long. So when we're talking about the cameras and the car being caught between one town and the other, and do they have him en route to one place, to the murders, or away from the murders? Do they have the in between? I'd imagine the answer is no, simply because of the time frame that had passed when they knew his path or whatever. Hope that makes sense. So that was the 23rd. And then on December 27th is when they take the trash from the Kohberger house over in Pennsylvania. And then the 28th, it comes back as matching the sheath, or being related to the sheath, a relative of the sheath DNA. 29th, the arrest affidavits. 30th, the arrest. So when you think about it that way, it's really not hard to imagine that, when they wrote the probable cause affidavit, they put everything in it that they had, which is what Bob Mata was saying. It's okay. Especially if he wasn't their suspect until the 19th of December, which makes way more sense, because guess what else happened on December 19th? The count of FBI agents that were fucking around on the case went from 42 to 60 on the 19th, the same day that they got Bryan Kohberger's name from Othram Labs. So I believe that was everything that they had. They put it in there, and the thought was, this guy's looking super sus. Surely, once we arrest him, there's going to be a shitload of data all over the place. His phones they got to have a plethora of stuff. So that's the intention. You arrest them, you have all this access to all of their stuff. You can send out all these warrants. You can try to do interviews, yada yada. But what happens if then you arrest that person because all these things like lined up right here, like in that week? And what if you start pulling search warrants and search warrants and search warrants and search warrants and data and this, and you're sorting through everything, and you don't see what you expected to see? And put you a bit on edge. I've heard the rumors about him working as a task force and informant and all that stuff, but I'm most inclined to believe that someone panicked when he went out of town and they thought he was never going to come back. And they did these re-interviews. And I think someone gave it up. And if I'm really going to speculate, I could speculate that the 12th they started doing these re-interviews, the 14th, so 2 days later, all of a sudden Brad Kopaka has this PTSD episode and ends up shot dead. Like what set him off like that? So I don't know, but them not having Bryan Kohberger as a suspect until December 19th makes way more sense than them having like known about it this whole time. And yet, and the narrative, is that they were investigating him. They had their eyes on him the whole time. They watched him and they followed him across the United States and this and that. But the thing though is that when they arrested him and then went to go serve a search warrant on his house, his apartment in Washington, they didn't even know that he had a storage unit until they walked in the door and saw the key for the storage unit. But yet, the day that he was arrested, and people were looking him up, and we were, digging into this and that, we found out he lived at that apartment complex. Like, it's very, very easy to go on the Steptoe Apartments website and pull up like their, not handbook, but, their, whatever. They got like a whole thing with all the rules and this and that. And it says that they get storage units. So how didn't they know that he had a storage unit till they walked in, had to call the judge at 7:00 in the morning and say, we're here at his apartment serving a warrant and we found this key, and to me it looks like something for a padlock, like for a storage unit. What's even more interesting though is that it was served by WSU police, and like their asses should know that those people in those complexes all have storage units. But whatever. I'm just saying that makes way more sense. And it's okay. Like, it's okay. I assure you. People are like, I feel like a lot of the arguments comes from people thinking, like, when you question something, or you're talking about the timeline of things, or you're saying, something doesn't make sense about that. Or I say, I don't think that they knew about Bryan Kohberger. Why did they? Very first thing I've said since all these came out, why didn't they pull a warrant for Bryan Kohberger at all until December the 23rd? If they knew about him plumb on November 29th. What took so long? And you either get the whole like, well, that's just what you can see. Ma'am, I can see what's been served and returned because, as I've stated over and over again, and the only reason they're even posting this shit on this Idaho cases of interest on the Supreme Court page is because these warrants are public records once they've been served. They're public records in Idaho. They are all subject to records requests. And as long as they've been served and that person is in jail, knows that it's been served, they've gotten a return that says what's been taken, it's a public record. So rather than people constantly requesting these warrants, they started putting them up on the site. And the upside to that for them is that before they upload it, they can ask the judge to seal the affidavits. And there's really no possibility that some clerk is going to accidentally shoot one off to somebody, you know what I mean? Because they know that everything that's getting uploaded is getting uploaded to that site. So, I haven't had an opportunity to look at the 2019 to 2023 Sentra, but I find it very, so we were all like bent out of shape when we're talking about, well, they told us it was a 2011 to 2013. Now you're telling us it's the 2015 is the person that did it. Well, how about if we throw a wrench into it and tell you that before we thought it was that, we thought it was a brand new Nissan Sentra. And that's a good point. We've been saying that like forever. Like there's no way they followed him across the United States. He had to have gotten out to pee someplace or throw something away. Why would they wait until he was all the way at home and then wait an additional week or two while he was at home before they tried to collect any DNA from the trash? They didn't. He was already in Pennsylvania. He'd been there for days before they decided, before they got his name and was like, oh shit, that's our suspect. So, I guess my concern with it is how terrible is your surveillance footage? If it's that bad that you don't have a license plate, which makes zero sense because we could walk through and that's something we could do for another time, but you can walk through all those intersections. Actually, I could post them. They take photos in all directions. They're the two of them are college towns. There's kids all over the place that are driving around with license plates that are only on the back. So, but No Chains No More said, so who knows what a PSYOP is? My brother was a PSYOP agent in the Marine Corps in Africa. So what could be exculpatory evidence, and if we're looking outside of, let's say Bethany, who they've made a claim, see, that's not appreciated here. I'm just saying, because the truth of the matter is that my little brother, who's very accomplished in the Marine Corps, did a very good job through multiple tours of duty until he went to Africa. So, not appreciated. He did it for you. So, if we're looking outside of Bethany, does anybody have any idea of how this car business could be exculpatory? So when we're talking about exculpatory, we're talking about, it could be any number of things, really. Like, for instance, having another suspect whose DNA was also on the sheath, and also not coming up in the system. Let's say there was a single male profile. I'm speculating here. There was a single male profile on the button snap of the sheath. We know that from the affidavit, but we don't know if there was any other DNA found on the sheath, right? Like anywhere on the sheath. What if there was another unknown male profile somewhere else on the sheath, and they haven't yet identified that person? Or didn't continue to run that down, like to find out who it is, after they got Bryan Kohberger's name back from Othram. Law enforcement did say that only a few cars come in and out that time of night, but it looked like a hell of a lot of cars to me. And people walking around. There was plenty going on at almost 4 a.m. I'm just going to throw this out there because then we should go, because I'm going to put him in bed. He fell asleep on the couch. Someone explain to me what this means. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. Can anyone explain that word salad to me? And also, if the male was driving a white Elantra and it was, let's say, out of sight of cameras parked in the back, her window directly stares at the back parking lot. So, did she see headlights turn on? Did she hear a car start? Did she hear the sliding door open? Those are all reasons I would think that investigators would believe that the murderer left the scene. But not. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. Not out it, just towards it. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. Okay, probably smart. What about that back window, though? DM did not state that she recognized the male. Okay. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. How? What? Where did you? How? I I never really did so great in like math and stuff, but by God, I always did good on reading comprehension. Like I love to read. I read every single day. I have no fucking clue what that means. The male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. How'd you get there? How did we get there? It's almost like you redacted like paragraphs. Why be so nosy? You can text 911. And I don't know if you can do it everywhere, but I did look specifically for that in Moscow, and you can in Moscow. I'm sorry. You're all saying it doesn't make any sense. I was hoping that, I mean, that doesn't make, it doesn't make any sense. That is like 4 random paragraph. That's like 4 random sentence. Like you just, they don't even like run together. Frozen shock phase. This is something else that I want to say because I've heard this like all over the place, including from experts. Okay. Nowhere in this affidavit does it ever say that Dylan was scared at all. Being in a frozen shock phase for obviously not a very long time, and then just locking your door and seemingly going to sleep. It doesn't say anywhere that she was scared. And here's the thing. If she was scared, she would have had to know that there was something to be scared of. So she would have had to know that he just slaughtered all her friends. Or she would have had to know, well, that's what she would have had to know. What else had she been scared about? And she saw him walk back towards the male walked towards the back sliding glass door. And again, if if you were scared, and the problem with frozen shock phase is that it's quoted. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that they put it in quotes because they were implying that they were quoting her. If she was scared, and if the killer was in a car that was maybe parked behind the house, out of view of the cameras, she would have seen, the lights would have like lit up her back window. She would have heard a car. How many cars were starting? Were there other cars that were around that were starting? Because then I have to like wonder how many other cars were starting. And if she was scared, then you have to wonder why she didn't call police. I personally don't think she was scared. I think she was not scared at all. I think that's why she didn't call the police, because she wasn't scared. She had no reason to be. They'll ask, I guarantee it. How many times have you come out of your bedroom to go to the bathroom or something in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, and someone was walking around your house? I'm sure that wasn't the first time. They probably said, what did you do when you saw the person? And she probably said, nothing. I just stood there. I didn't know what was going on. Just stood there. I locked my door. How was I supposed to know that something had just happened? Why didn't I call police? Because I didn't know anything had just happened. I went to bed. So, also, like, and actually, we can talk about it next time. I'll get it pulled up, but I've mentioned this before, and I read a well, she had to have had access to her phone, because how did she summon friends to the house? Like, that whole thing is just so unclear. Like, did she go out of her room and she was like, why is nobody out here yet? I'm going to summon friends. Because I think, and it was very clear in the press release, which was November 17th was the one where it first come up, where they say that the 2 surviving roommates, both of them, summoned friends to the house because one of the second floor victims, they thought that they were passed out and wouldn't wake up. Total side note, what I was getting ready to say about the study, I'll post it for anybody that's interested, is it was like this whole thing about 911 call, like perpetrators and 911 calls. And it was like this, I don't even know how many, like many pages, like 100, at least 100 pages. And they were talking about different scenarios and different percentages of people that. So let's step outside of this case for a second, just because this doesn't apply to this. This applies to a number of studies or a number of cases that they were studying. And they were looking at like different variables. So what would be said in the 911 call by either someone innocent versus the perpetrator, what percentage of people that called 911 were the perpetrator, things like that. It's actually super interesting. And they have case studies too that they talk about in it. And one of the things, well, there was many things, but they said that, so some people think if you killed somebody in your house, why would you call 911? Like, you would stay in your room and wait as long as possible, and then say, this is going to sound like I'm connecting the two, but I'm just telling you what this study said. You know what? As a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll give you the example that they gave, this case study. So there was this man, and he was married to this lady. And one morning, he called her brother down the street and said, you need to come over here. I'm hurt in the kitchen, and I need you to go check on Sleuthy upstairs, because there was an intruder last night and they shot me. So the brother comes, walks in. The husband's in the kitchen. And he says, you need to go upstairs and you need to check on Sleuthy, because somebody broke in last night and tried to rob us. And the brother goes upstairs and finds that the wife had been killed. And on top of that, had been in a position that would lead someone, first responders walking in, to assume that she had been like sexually assaulted also. So the brother goes down, his sister, he just found his sister and calls the police. And they come, and the husband's, been shot. He gets some help. And they find out through the investigation. Well, let me back up a little bit. The husband saw the killer. So his story was that he heard noise at the bedroom at the end of the hallway upstairs. And he was like, it woke me up. It sounded like the window. Somebody was coming in the window. So I left the bedroom and I ran into a man. And the description that he gave of this man was the most entirely generic description that you could possibly like a 6 foot tall man. So he gave this generic description of this person, and they're thinking, what the fuck? Like, we're never gonna, like, this could literally be anybody. Yeah, bushy brows, basically. So they're doing their investigation, and they were interviewing him, and they're like, listen, like, help us understand. He's like, well, I ran into this person and we got into a fight, and then like fell downstairs, and the fight finished downstairs. He shot me, and I don't know what happened. And based on like, the wife being upstairs and how she was, and he's like, so the conclusion that they were supposed to come to was that this intruder got done fighting with the husband, shot him downstairs, and then went upstairs, ransacked the place, sexually assaulted the wife, killed her, and then left. And outside, police found a ladder that was like butted up to the windowsill. And it was fully made to look like, logically, that someone had found this ladder, put it up again in the window, and climbed in, and it happened exactly how the husband said that it happened. Except, like, it had rained for, like, days prior to. This is actually super interesting. It had rained, like, days prior to. And the ground was super soft. That's exactly what happened. He staged it. What happened was they went and they moved the ladder and found out that it hadn't made any indent whatsoever in the mud below it. So no one had gotten up on that ladder and climbed through the window and yada, yada, yada. Turns out the husband killed her, staged her to look like somebody had sexually assaulted her. Went downstairs, knocked a bunch of shit over, went downstairs, shot himself, waited, and then called the brother because he thought, and this was a trend in other cases as well, he thought that if he called, it would look more suspicious, as opposed to someone coming and, stumbling on the two of them, being a witness to seeing him downstairs shot, yada, yada. They try to separate themselves from actually finding the body. But there were many other things, like one of the things to take into consideration about 911 calls, which I still don't understand why we don't have this one, is things that they say. One of them was if they were like too specific about everything that had happened, or they start going into where they were. They were asleep the whole time. They never heard anything. Or if they're like asked to start initiating like CPR and stuff. I think that's Sarah Boone, that suitcase killer lady. I think this came into play with hers as well. But like not being willing to initiate CPR and stuff like that. It was just really interesting. And to be honest, what boiled down to was that a large majority of the time, not a large majority, but there was a large portion of cases where the actual perpetrator was the one that called. And generally, they would make it as though like they were a victim of some kind, like that husband did, because they know that. So say you kill somebody in your house and you're like, I'm the first one that they're going to be looking at, right? Because I was here. But maybe they like won't look at me if I also suffered, It's just really where people's brains go, I guess. I don't know who's saying somebody's throwing Dylan under the bus. I'm here to tell you that all I said was that I don't think she was scared. If she was scared, I have way more questions. Way more questions. I mean, I still do have some questions. Did she not get up to pee in the morning? I look forward to the clarification of like how the two surviving roommates determined that one of the second floor victims was asleep and not waking up, or unconscious and not waking up. Because did you try to wake them up? Did you see a bunch of blood? Like, I have to know, like, what, you didn't call 911 and say that you thought one of the second floor victims was asleep and not waking up. You called a friend. So I don't know. Angel, it's a study. I can post it. I have a community thing that I can surely post PDFs. I have to move my Elantra. Just kidding. Apart from there having to have been tons of blood, if you've smelled that, I don't mean to be like morbid and whatnot, but I mean, the smell alone should have woken up the people in the house by that time. Eight hours of all of that settling in the house. It should have like got straight into their brains. Never mind like walking out of the bedroom. All right, guys. It's been 2 hours and 40 minutes. I need to carry him, and I'm so tired. We were up so late watching that first half of the second hearing yesterday. When I checked before I came on here, I still couldn't find it. I'm not going to go watch on somebody else's live stream. I'm not going to live stream a live stream that was live streamed. And then the quality is garbage because I did it directly from Court TV's thing last night, and still, like 90% of it, I had no clue what was being said. I was just laughing at the chat. Literally, you guys are talking, like my stomach, I'm sitting here, like I'm sweating, like, like thinking about that smell. Please stop. We're going to go because it's just so, there's no way that it didn't wake somebody up. My stomach is like literally turning. I just saw somebody say, would you not have spoken to your murdered roommate's parents by now? If they were told not to talk to anyone, they went and got tattoos together and had to have spoken. Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I would imagine that they likely were told not to speak with people, because the problem with that is that if they start talking, first of all, if they are talking to each other, then what one might have experienced might start confusing the other one, and their stories might start like mixing together. Like, you want their story to be their story. But that's a good point about them going to get the tattoos and stuff. I don't know how nobody has spotted them by now. That's weird to me. All the media, like, stalking people, taking pictures of Jack and stuff, like getting his dog out of the car. I just don't understand how they wouldn't have found her by now. Either of them. Nobody got a picture whenever they went to go get tattoos. I don't know. It's just weird. How do we even know that was them? Like, how do we even know that was their arms? I don't know. Thanks for being here, guys. We're going to go. I love you. And I hope you have a good night. My stomach is still turning. It's like, pray for me. I'm going to have to take some Pepto-Bismol and go to bed. But thanks for being here. Have a good night. I love you. Jess is here. It says device is not connected, so I don't know. But she's been back here, like, popping up your all's comments, so she's been great, too. And I don't know how many mods are in the chat, but thank you guys, too. Jess, you probably fell asleep. Dawn, I'm glad that you liked this live. We'll come back. I still got to hunt down that second half of the second hearing. They're being super weird about releasing it, which I find incredibly odd. Where is the footage? Just put it out. Like, this is the problem with you all doing what you're doing. And I also have been putting something together about the first hearing from yesterday. Mary. That's okay. I'm glad you're here now. But I'm putting something, it's going to take a little while because, like, I'm not good at that stuff, but putting something together about the first hearing from yesterday with Shannon Gray and a couple of things that were said. And I found some interesting clips that probably, like, we forgot about from the family, specifically to back up my opinion of why I think that they would likely be called as witnesses at trial. So maybe we'll premiere that. The last time we tried to premiere something, it didn't work. But we're going to be going on vacation soon. And I have good service literally everywhere but here. So, all right, I'm bouncing off. 2019 to 2023, Nissan Sentra. We need to start comparing all the pictures. They better look exactly the same. Exactly the same. All right, I love you guys. Good night.